To order the Whatcom County Ferry Advisory Committee's meeting of March 1st, May 1st, thank you. Okay. Thank you all for coming. Could we please call the roll? Oh, Janice Cottrell here, Richard Fry. I think Richard's traveling. Pam Gould here. Diane Harper here. Todd Legacy.
Present.
Carol Lant here. Tom Philpott.
Here.
Catherine Shornack. And we have one vacant unincorporated area position at this time.
I think Rich was planning on signing in, so we might watch for him to appear on Zoom. He's traveling.
Okay. Rich Fry, you can let us know maybe if he's there. Okay, could we stand for the flag salute? As we focus on bringing our best selves to our discussion tonight. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, it's my pleasure to welcome Roland Middleton from Public Works and Gary Poole, our Senior Master of the Ferry. And I don't know if we have any other county council members in the Zoom audience. Could you tell us, Kim, if John Scanlon is present?
I don't believe so.
Okay, so at this time, I don't believe we have any council members present, but we do have Kim Boone, our clerk from the county, helping us with the meeting tonight. Thank you so much. And I'd also like to remember to recognize and welcome all of our members in the Zoom audience, which seem to be numerous, and our members here in the meeting. Thank you all for coming. The first order of business is to accept the agenda. Do we have any comments or changes on the agenda from anyone? I do have one thing that I would like to change, and that is under the committee work section, when we are going to discuss a process for electing WCFAC members to a new ad hoc committee. It also says that we're going to appoint some community members, but we are not going to do that tonight. Appoint WCFAC members to the community, and then they will become community members for joining. So that's the only change to the agenda.
John just joined us.
Oh, great. Welcome, John.
Hi.
Hi, thanks for coming.
Welcome.
Great, okay, so, our first order of business is Gary Poole. Do you have any news for us, about the ferry, about?
So the minutes, Pam? Minutes?
Oh, I'm sorry, did I, oh. I skipped over that. So, we all received, minutes from our last meeting. Do we have any changes to the minutes as delivered to you? Hearing no comments, we'll accept the minutes as written. Thank you, Bob. And next, we'll have Gary Poole, our senior master, chat if he has anything to say about dry dock, upcoming fare changes, selling tickets, etc.
As of right now, upcoming fare changes and tickets, I have nothing on that. Dry dock is moving ahead. We met with Lake Union Shipyard today via Zoom, getting our schedule set. So we are scheduled to leave on the 18th, will be our last day of, or the day we leave, there'll be no service after the 17th. and we should be back, hopefully, everybody knock on wood, on the 15th. So as of right now, we're moving forward and actually getting a lot of good momentum going.
Great. And then the way the plan is going now, you guys will run all of your runs up until,
Midnight on the 17th, so the 12 o'clock from the island on the 17th will be our last run from the island, and 12:10 to the island from Goose Bay will be our last run.
and then you'll head to Seattle?
And then the vessel will be probably shut down. And we were working on times to leave. Today was part of our deal. So we'll be out of service after midnight.
So then on Saturday and Sunday, what are the plans?
So on Saturday, they're gonna put the floats in. Hopefully, I think it's, look at the schedule to make sure I remember right. 'Cause I haven't been doing the float part of it. But start running about between 2 and 4, somewhere in there, commence service. And then Sunday they shut down again because they have to put the ramp in place for the island side. And that'll take about 5-6 hours, I think, what they're hoping, so.
Okay, so once the ferry leaves on Saturday and Sunday,
Then
their
you're,
service will begin in the afternoon at some point on
yes.
both Saturday and Sunday of the weekend, the ferry leaves.
yeah,
Gotcha.
And is that passenger only,
passenger only.
bicycles?
Yeah, bicycles, if you look on the website, the Whatcom County website, and punch in the dry dock part of it, it tells you all the parameters for how many bikes they'll take at a time and all those details.
How many dogs?
I handle the easy part, down to Seattle.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. And Roland, do you have any things you'd like to share with us about what's happening?
Well, there's lots of things going on. I wanted to let you know that we will be striping the roads on the island this summer. There's a mower, and we're also delivering a couple of vehicles during dry dock. That's coming over relatively quickly. And then other than that, we can get into the conversation with the new Ferry. We'll do that, I think,
Sure, yeah.
later on.
Yeah,
But that's what we've got going right now.
gotcha. And also Roland, Tom has them, did bring the large scale drawings from James Lee of the boat for us. And so those will be at the library with the other drawings of the upland areas of both the ferry docks for people to check out and look at the library. You can't take them out. But the pictures we had before were small. These are large format drawings of the shapes and dimensions of the boat.
Our committee would like to review these before I put them into the library, is that okay?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, we can send out a little note like when they're gonna be happening. Okay, so next we're gonna, the first part of the meeting is gonna be spent on committee work, because as you know, the committee can only talk together, all of us, at a public meeting. And so that's what we're gonna do today. But before we begin that, I have a few remarks about things that have happened in the last month. And then we'll have reports from the ad hoc committee, the new dock committee, and we'll also elect our new island access committee for when the new ferry is being built and the docks are being worked on. So these are my comments since we had our last meeting. Since our last WCFAC meeting, I attended the Public Works and Health Committee meeting on the 23rd of April to discuss the proposed new changes to the ferry rate code with Public Works for the first time. Both Liz and Randy were there, and we were able to ask them direct questions about some of the changes and why they brought those changes forward, and they were able to answer very directly. And the council was at that meeting, and we talked back and forth, but no neither the county council did not choose to put forward any amendments to the code, and they brought it forward to the council that evening as written, and as you guys have all seen it. So at the county council meeting that evening, they had the open hearing of the code. I spoke about another potential adjustment to dates, but they elected to not take that suggestion. Catherine spoke remotely, and the codes were passed. They were signed, I believe, on the 28th or the 29th of April by Thought Call, and they will go into effect on May, 9th. So May 9th, the new code will go into effect. The executive order to raise ferry rates is scheduled to go into effect on June 1st with a 1-month grace period for current punch cards, so that the punch cards can be exchanged for new ones with the value that you have on the punch card will go toward the next one that you get. The new punch cards will be available for 10 and 20 trip multi-ride cards, but the discount is the same for the 10 and the 20 ride card. And so Gary will be able to tell us a little bit more about when those will be available, but I would assume at the next sale that we have in the beginning of June.
Yeah, I think that's their plan.
Got it. After reports from our 2 ad hoc committees, the WCFAC committee members are going to discuss how we want to tackle planning for the extended passenger-only service during our new terminal construction. It's predicted to occur in approximately 3 years. This is a culmination of planning that started in 2015. And on April 22nd, Director Cosa advised WCFAC to this fall. So I just want you to know, this is why we're bringing this up tonight. At this time, Public Works is requesting that the Ferry Advisory Committee focus on assisting with planning for the major service outage. Your expertise and input are invaluable in helping us facilitate a plan to address the vehicle service outage during the construction of terminals. Likewise, your recommendations on other items such as transit solutions, level of service, alternative funding sources are also welcome. So after the committee discussion, when we talk, then we will open it up for the community input about this new committee. But to start, our committee is going to talk together because we haven't had that opportunity. Following this work, we will have open session comments. If you would like to speak in open session, please sign up at the table or raise your hand with Kim and she will call on you during open session. Or once we open it for public comment when we are talking about the new committee. And finally, as you may or may not be aware, there is a pending court case involving outstanding Public Works ferry system accounting issues. If these proceedings affect any current plans by Public Works, they will notify us, as usual, on the county ferry website. If you have not signed up for the automatic notifications from this system, I encourage you to do so. Then you'll know if any changes take place, the ferry is late or early or whatever is happening, you'll always know. So you can go to the county site and sign up there. Okay, so let's open it now for a discussion among the committee about how we want to move forward with, excuse me, you're right. We want to start with the 2 ad hoc committee reports, then we'll do that. So Diane, as the ad hoc committee for ferry rates and codes.
Yes, thank you. And this.
So
So the new ferry rates are available on the website. And what I brought as far as the report from our work on fares goes into a bit more detail than just the rates themselves. And the major point, I guess I would like to make is that, and I have a few for the audience, that despite our presentation to the county council and submission to the county executive, where we had proposed 25% a discount for multi-ride tickets, which is identical to the other county ferries and also to the state ferries that serve a commuter population. The county executive felt very strongly that 10 to 15% was sufficient, and so where we ended up was a compromise where we started out currently 35%. We proposed a compromise of 25%. He had proposed 15%, and we ended up at 18 or 19%. So we didn't gain a whole lot, but we did gain some. 2 points are that the passenger pedestrian ferry trips for all of the other ferry systems are in the state are about a third of what it costs to bring a passenger vehicle with driver across. In our case, they're 50%. And what Public Works had already a year ago December, when I first approached them about this, had said that, well, the thing to do was simply not to raise the passenger pedestrian rate and gradually let the 1/3 happen as the passenger vehicle with driver rate increased. So that is what they're doing. So the result is there is no change in the cash rate for passenger pedestrian. And because the council, for whatever reason, felt strongly that the cash fares were of benefit to the unincorporated area that bears 45% of the cost of the ferry, they kept the vehicle with driver cash fare down to just a 7% increase. So the current cash vehicle with driver fare went up from $14 to $15. As I said, the passenger pedestrian cash fare has remained at $8. With a sizable decrease in the discount in the multi-ride tickets, the result was that the passenger pedestrian multi-ride price went up by 46%. So you will pay 46% more for your multi-ride punch cards per trip. I mean, you'll be buying a 10 or a 20 instead of 25, but the net result is 46% more per trip. And the vehicle with driver multi-ride punch cards went up in price 30%. And I just want to mention there, I've had quite a debate with Randy, the Public Works accountant, on this. He only looks at the change in fares. And we all have a $1 surcharge for capital accumulation for the new ferry. So he doesn't count that when he looks at what percentage increase, for instance. And so there is a difference between fares and price. So if you see conflicting figures, it may be that someone is comparing the price of the fare, whereas I keep trying to persuade them that no one cares what the price of the fare is. They care what the price of the trip is. So anyway, so that was kind of a discouraging outcome, particularly since we made the case that all of the other ferries do a summer surcharge. And in fact, this group, at our special meeting on fairs with a lot of community participation, came up with proposing a summer surcharge, which would have resulted with the fares we proposed, bringing in about $70,000 a year. So, our proposal with a 25% multi-ride discount was an increase of $236,000 ordinarily plus $70,000 in the summer, which would have brought in $306,000 more per year. The net change that the county adopted, or the council by resolution told the county executive to adopt new fares, and the county executive by executive decision, order, came out with $320,000. So we were only $14,000 apart, but given that the county council did not want to consider a summer surcharge, despite the fact that every other ferry does that, because the county council felt like that was, or at least some members of it, that was the one benefit that the unincorporated area got, was they got to come over here in the summer and not have to pay a surcharge. But we all know that who's coming over in the summer are not necessarily unincorporated area county residents. They're quite a bit more likely to be Bellingham residents who don't pay any unincorporated area road tax, or people from out of the county.
Okay, so, and one other thing I just wanted to point out is, it used to be that if you got a 10 punch ticket or a 25 punch ticket, the discount was different. You got a bigger discount if you got 25, less discount if you got 10. That is erased. And now the discount is all the same. So if you want to just buy a 10 punch ticket, you can. You'll get the same discount if you buy a 10 or a 20. So that is different than the way it used to be. So let's briefly cover the changes, okay, because we have a lot to do tonight.
Okay, all right, one other thing on fares, and that is they have affirmed that the needs-based tickets will always be the least. And so the needs-based tickets, again, the passenger pedestrian went up 0%. And the needs-based vehicle with driver went up only 8%. So those are basically the needs-based tickets, which you can get either based upon straight out income through going through a process in Bellingham of being judged low income, or if you have a property tax, I don't want to say discount, I can't quite think, break because of your income. There are a number of people on the island that get property tax discounts. If either of those qualify you for the needs-based, and the needs-based is a 65% discount over the cash fare. So it's quite a nice discount. Anyway, I would hope that we would go back in future years and try again for the summer surcharge. And I would also have liked to have tried for the 25% multi-trip discount. But now we're going to briefly cover the major changes in codes, and I'll mention why that does not look that possible.
And so, it's like 3 minutes, 4 minutes, because we have a lot more, and Tom has stuff to do.
You're ahead of schedule then.
Okay, yeah, okay.
So there's some new definitions. If this is only gonna be 3 or 4 minutes, then I'll just quit now. Because I either wanna cover this new stuff so that everybody hears about it, or I don't wanna, you know.
Is this, are these things that we have not discussed before?
I do not think that we have discussed them since the first meeting in February. So I think there's kind of a gap in here.
I would like to hear the whole presentation.
Okay.
So, and I will try and speed up, but I do think these are new and major changes in the code that decides ferry fares. The first new definition, fare box considered revenue, that I want to mention is one that the council has put in that will allow them to now, allow the ARPA funds, the COVID, remedial funds to be applied, and the county council and Public Works supposedly are going to be hearing that and adopting it later this month. But we were also told that the fare box considered revenue means that, if we go to the council with something like the Dolphins in the future, where there's all of a sudden a huge $800,000 increase, that this will allow the council to step in and find funds and deposit funds in the fare box for us. And the council members all nodded their heads and agreed with that. And as I said privately to one council member, I hope you're prepared to follow up on this, because we have an aging infrastructure and we're going to have more huge expenses. So remember that fare box considered revenue. It allows us to go to the council and ask for additional funds from somewhere else in the county coffers to be contributed to the fares. We've talked about non-capital emergency repairs, and this is a new thing. It now is included under total operating expenses. The Public Works proposed and the council adopted 3 changes to the definition of total operating expenses, and as you all know, that's has been at issue now for over a year. Now specifically included are all non-capital emergency repairs. The phrase of all physical elements has been removed, and I think that's probably in order to allow the new addition, which is the monthly time lease or its replacement will continue to be considered part of the total operating expenses calculation, regardless of implementing the Governmental Accounting Standard Board's statement number 87 requiring lease accounting changes for financial reporting. So that's pretty much clear that the lease will continue. Another change associated with that, though, is that Public Works did offer up to $150,000 per calendar year towards these non-capital emergency repairs. And what that would mean, for instance, in the case of the Dolphins, is the first year it was about $300,000 and $350,000 in costs. So $150,000 of that would be covered by Public Works, leaving the remaining $200,000 to be added to the adjusted total operating expenses that we pay 55% of. The second year, the total was $420,000. So of that, Public Works would have kicked in $150,000. And so again, leaving the fare box, leaving the adjusted total operating expenses to cover most of it. Again, this fare box considered revenue is supposed to be out in the future for that. There's a new thing called the Ferry Fund Reserve Target. We had asked them to put a limit on how much the cumulative fare box reserve could accumulate before a fare discount or a fare reduction was considered. And what Public Works did is, instead of considering that as part of the cumulative fare box reserve, which is just our ferry fees plus fare box considered revenue, whatever it is, they've defined the Ferry Fund Reserve target as 50% of the average prior 3 years of the adjusted operating expenses, and said that they will contribute 45% county funds and the fare box will contribute 55%. I won't read in detail the last passage, but what it ends up being is that now the 55% of the operating expenses each year will have added to it the Ferry Fund Reserve target. And until that amount is met, there won't be any cumulative fare box reserve accumulated. Oh, one other change that I thought was interesting was that, it used to be that county, by used to be, I mean 20 years ago, county employees or anybody coming across had to either buy a punch card or pay cash, and that was in the ordinance. Then it got changed to where it was free, and then it got changed back to where there was a $10 per trip credit for every county trip. That has now been removed. So free passage for all Whatcom County Public Works and sheriff deputies and Fire District 11. And despite what Director Costa told us about mortuary vehicles only being after hours, the actual wording in the text says all mortuary vehicles will also be free. So the only $10 credit will now be on Ferry crew members who were under contract so that they would get free passage for them and their families. And there will continue to be a $10 credit for that, but not for county vehicles. So minor, but kind of irritating that we didn't realize that that was going to be changed. The good news is, as Pam mentioned earlier, the multi-ride cards can be traded in at full value for any unpunched. And the other thing is that I want to be really clear about this. You only have 30 days to use the old cards. You have to have a new card or pay cash after 30 days. But the old cards can be traded in at any time. There is no time limit on old cards. So if you dig out a card from, I assume, from 2012, or wherever, you can trade it in for value on the new rates. So the thing I alluded to when I started that was discouraging is the council went along with this wholesale restriction on what any future council can do by adopting into the ordinance, into the code. They adopt by ordinance, but this is the Whatcom County Code. A 20% limit on multi-ride discounts. So what that means is we would actually have to go in, get an ordinance adopted to change the code to allow a future council to make us equal to all of the other ferry systems. So that I thought was a bit of a rubbing your face in it as far as, no, we don't want to give a discount to residents. We just want to give a quantity discount. So that's about it. I was totally discouraged on two counts. One is the code is very poorly written. Clearly, Director Cosa does not have adequate staff help on writing the code, and Roland has said he has nothing to do with it, so I'm not casting aspersions at him. But there were multiple places in the code where things could have been fixed that we pointed out, and they weren't fixed. And there were multiple places like this silly thing about the mortuary vehicles where Director Cosa was very specific in what she thought it meant, but that's not what the code says. So I was disappointed that they were unable to fix some of these other things, and it would be whiny if I start listing all the minor things that they could have fixed that they didn't. But I was also discouraged that absolutely nothing that we recommended other than we said, go ahead and make the new fares effective in 30 days instead of in 3 months. And we did that because we thought that that was fair to people who pay cash, because they right away have to pay the new fares. So that gave the county some money, and so that particular one went. But as far as I can tell, of all of the work we did and all of the things we suggested, that was the only one adopted. And so I say that for two reasons. One is because it's important that we all recognize that it's in a hard place as far as money. The unincorporated road fund has a lot of demands on it. And right now, the county council and the county executive sees fairs as a place where they can take in more money. And every change was every change except one was basically designed to take in more money from fairs. So, the culmination of that is the council decided that they didn't want this kind of uproar over a big fair change to have to come up again. So they adopted the silliest thing in the whole code, which is that there will be an annual fare increase according to the CPI that will take effect in January. Now, there are three things wrong with that. Yes, so now it is in the county code. We will have another fare increase this fall. The three things wrong with it are, one, the county council itself adopts a county budget every 2 years. So what is this every year thing? The second thing is the CPI. The CPI has nothing at all to do with the kinds of costs associated with the fairs. But the third, and to me, the most outrageous thing wrong with it, is the county itself wants to increase its fares in even dollar amounts. So, you know, you have a 2% CPI increase, okay, then $8 goes to $8.16, you know, it doesn't work. But the thing that really got to me was the fact that the council said, oh, but if it's a really small increase, we don't have to do it. It's exactly the same way they treated most of this code. They don't have to do it, despite the fact it's in the county code, and the exact wording is, at a minimum, fares or expenditures shall be adjusted each year for inflation per the Consumer Price Index. All CPI-related fare changes shall go into effect in January of the following year. That code language leaves them no wiggle room. They cannot decide, oh, it's just a minor thing, we won't do it. They have put it in the code that they have to do it. And the fact that the council doesn't understand what they're doing when they adopt this code just drives me, who used to work in the county, absolutely berserk, as you can tell. And with that, I'll conclude my presentation.
There were definitely some other, I'm curious, Gary, would you say it would be challenging for the deckhands to have to do new fares, new tickets every single year?
No,
No, they can manage that.
yeah, no, but my secretary, Chantel, is probably gonna have a little bit of work.
Pardon me?
My secretary, Chantel, she's the one that has, you know, the deckhands and the ferry, they see very little. All they see is you guys and the money you handle.
Yeah,
It's the behind the scenes that gets hit. People you do not see are the ones that scramble every time something like this happens. So,
right.
you know, you guys only see a little bit of what affects the ferry.
Well, one other minor point, the fact that it would take effect in January when half our population isn't here. And it takes effect in 30 days. So you have somebody that's gone for a month or two in the winter and they come back and their punch card is no good, you know? So the January take effect is a kind of awkward also. Thank you, and thank you, Pam.
So it was a disappointing meeting, I have to say, but we are going to move on.
Relevant question.
So the next report that we have is from the Electric Ferry and Docks Committee. Tom.
Okay, so I've prepared a report on behalf of our committee. We, in the past, had access to Zoom to do our meetings. We haven't done that, so I have to confess, since the last presentation we did at the past WCFAC meeting, I've simply reached out to members of our group to give me some input, which I've collated into what I'm going to say tonight. Mainly what we're doing is addressing in 4 points, as it's a follow-up to what KPFF had to say, and there may be a few loose ends. But I also wanted to say that we've had on this committee tons of input from our members that isn't necessarily reflected in these 4 questions. And you're going to hear more from us on these issues. In other words, we don't have a bow on this and it's all finished. We've got more ongoing things to tie in with these questions. So, first one we say is, we've been told that the terminal and vessel drawings are 60% complete. We've requested those drawings and not received them, but I guess we have them here tonight.
Yeah, would you like to address these as you go, or do you want to read them?
Let's do that. That's the way to do it.
So the terminal drawings are actually nearing 30%. The idea of what is happening on the general concept drawing is at 60%, but actually details is nearing 30%. And as soon as those are available, I'll make sure that they're on the website. And I've been told there's like over 100 pages of details. So it goes into the size of the wheel stops at the parking lot and all of that stuff, which is what we have to have for permitting. And so that's what's nearing that. The vessel basic length and beam and those sorts of things is at 60%. But I don't know what, the problem is, it's a little different than regular public works projects. Public works projects, when you get ready to go to permit, you have a 30% drawing so that the regulatory agencies can look at that. Then you go to a 60% drawing, the regulatory agencies then say, you made the changes you need to go. And then when you go out to bid, you're at 100%. The vessel isn't that way. And so we're trying to figure out, and what I've been told, because I don't build boats other than lap straight in my garage, that they don't use those same terms. So we'll need to work out, and as we have additional information, we'll get that to you. So as far as percentage goes on the vessel, that doesn't equate. So right now, exactly where the bulkheads are going and how big they are and all that stuff, that's not done. But the deck, sitting on the deck, and the general configuration of the engine room, but not even how the motors are set, hasn't been established yet.
There was a tail end of that one. The county has requested 100%. In the interest of time, we're keep going here.
I don't know how to turn that.
Turn it off.
Okay,
Okay, so,
and then last sentence,
Yeah.
statement about 100% drawings by July 24th. We have to have the drawings ready to go by July of 2024 for the regulatory review,
okay.
but that's not at 100%, if you know what I mean.
That wasn't clear to me what you just said.
We have to have the 30% drawings for the terminals done by July.
Got it.
So we have to have 100% of those 30% drawings
100% of the 30% will be done by
because
July.
KPFFs have been working on a couple of different issues dealing with the shoreline program, because everything is within the shoreline program, and DOE has a little bit different interpretation while we're being recorded, so I won't say, but we're working on some of those interpretations for the design. But when you see them, you'll have a lot more information on the terminals. And I'll check with James and Liz. I'm not sure who's working on, I think Liz is actually the lead for the vessel. I'll check with her and see where we're sitting on that.
According to the scope of work, I thought that by mid-May, the majority of the vessel was supposed to be complete.
That is what I recall, yes.
That's not the propulsion side of the thing, that's the vessel itself. We're still working on the propulsion side of it, figuring out what we can do, can't do. And so, once we get that figured out, it all comes down to, power, fuel, all that kind of stuff. Then we can do the more of the detailed work and design. Does that make sense?
So you're designing the structure
The
And
structure's
then
all-
whatever propulsion is has to fit.
Right, the structure's been designed. And the layout and interior wise, Diane, they'll be made to fit what goes inside.
Yeah, but as far as some of the propulsion issues has to do with environmental concerns with regard to eelgrass that are nearby, depth of the draft and all of that. That's still being worked out.
Okay, the next point addresses, future shore power has not yet been defined, at least not to our understanding. This relates to the final propulsion selection, and you'll see propulsion come up a few times in what I'm saying here, because, what we're really talking about in the big picture is that we're kind of indirectly asking how soon total electrification could possibly happen.
Part of that is up to PSC in delivering the power. We're gonna be putting in infrastructure in the terminals ready for PSC to deliver it. And we're working with trying to get into their capital improvement program to make that happen. We're also looking at identifying where we would be able to store the battery compartment on the island side to be able to go all electric. We're not able to do electric on Gooseberry because of several different constraints. One is, as has been mentioned before, we have king tide issues. You can't put electrical equipment when it's a foot underwater. There's also just not enough room anywhere within the lease, and the Lummi Nation and Whatcom County, quite frankly, are not willing to open that lease again because any modification has to be signed by the Secretary of Interior. So it's just not worth the very expense of doing that. And so electrification will be on the Lummi Island side, which works out better anyways, because that's where the boat is moored tonight.
Is a 2047 site able to take the power you need? 2047. You said this lease is over and they're gonna have to move the one on the mainland.
Yes, so the one on the mainland, if you go onto the website and look at the 2015, I think it was, Tiger Grant submittal by Lummi Nation, and you're looking through the pages there, it shows the terminal moved over towards the point where the original casino spot was, or where the old store used to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you'll see it's double lane loading, double lane exit, more queuing area, and that would be the new location. It
So
would-
we have the same king tide problems, the current one.
Except, what I was gonna say, except it's all elevated 3 to 4 or 5 feet through the whole area, all the way up that area, specifically because of that. Plus, the way to have your cables and all the equipment with 3 feet underneath when you can't dig at all because of cultural resources, lay your conduit and give yourself 3 feet of depth. And that's one of the reasons we're looking at doing that.
I thought that there was some question about whether or not the Lummi Nation was still interested in moving the ferry terminal.
There is no question they're interested in moving the terminal.
Okay,
It is how and when and that sort of thing. But essentially, right now, we've been informed that at the end of the lease will be the end of the lease. So whoever's gonna take over my job when hopefully in 61 months and 12 days from now, that's counting, I hopefully can afford to retire, that working with the Lummi Island group, it will be a forever work account, because there's, right after this work, we gotta start on the new terminal. I mean, it literally, the year after, everyone goes, hey, the new boat's here, great. Okay, now we gotta get going on the new terminal. So there is quite a bit of work to be done. I have met with the Lummi Nation Planning Commission and described the issue and answered many of their questions. The proposal for us to move is Lummi Nation's proposal. So it's not like we're trying to get them to be convinced that we need to put it up. We also will keep the terminal on Gooseberry safe, but in doing so, there are some restrictions, weight restrictions. And those weight restrictions will be on there as long as we're using it. The new terminal, of course, we built to have full standard, full weighted legal loads and all of that at all times.
So to be clear, when we're preparing for the new ferry to come, we will be adapting the Gooseberry Point dock to accept the new ferry. And then within a year, we'll be building the dock
No.
a second time?
No.
Planning.
Getting all the planning, quite frankly, what we're trying to do this next go around is figure out a funding mechanism that doesn't have the same restrictions that the MIRAD and the RAISE grant have, because they have put us into a very narrow window as far as construction and environmental work goes. So we may end up doing much of the environmental and design work on state funds before we even apply for federal funds. And so we're learning a lot from this process as well, and we're gonna utilize that knowledge into the next go around. But no, the goal is to have it done when either the terminal is costing too much to keep it going, or by the end of the lease, absolutely.
In 47,
46,
46.
October 12th, 2046.
Okay, the next question has to do with the intermittent use of the Whatcom chief during that 6-month period when the two terminals are being worked on. There's been a lot of input from islanders already to WCFAC, kind of looking for us to almost immediately solve this problem, which we can't do. But we are reviewing these things, and in fact, tonight we'll be appointing a new ad hoc committee that will deal just with the 6-month period. So you'll hear more about that. So we've talked to you, that ad hoc committee has talked with you and James about how that would be done, the intermittent use. And apparently the way it works is that the platform that the cranes are on could be moved by cables 100 feet back, such that the chief could come in on the side of it or around it and then directly into the current dock. And I believe you might want to speak more to that, but the point I'm making is it could be every 1 month, every so many weeks, that the chief is used for propane and et cetera, et cetera. And I think what you could say on that would allay the fears on the part of islanders to think that, we're doomed to something like that's not even possible.
No, it is possible. I don't know if it's probable. I don't know if it's planned, that we can plan for it, which is why for the last couple of years, I've been saying, it could be 6 months without vehicle. And let's make sure that if something bad happens, like they blow another motor, it's gonna be 6 months out anyway. But Gary and James talk all the time, trying to figure out, the real issue is gonna be timing of construction and what you pull out. So if it takes 7.5 weeks to pull the old wing walls out and put it in, I have no idea how long it takes. So please, then the chief is gone for 7.5 weeks because you got nothing to come up against.
Right.
You can't pull in the boat. But at the end of that, before we start working on the other dolphins, James and Gary, and I'll let Gary speak for himself, but I just talked to James about this, looking at doing what you just said, is pulling at night when they're done, because they can only work daylight hours anyways. So as soon as the sun goes down, they pull out and we run the chief. The length of time of running the chief, we don't know. Is that just 12 hours? Is it 2 days or anything else? Because we've got to get it all done in 1 year. So that's part of of it. And we don't even know what that 1 year is yet because we put in the request for the extended fish window, the construction window of time to construct. We put in the request and we're getting some pushback from Fish and Wildlife. And so we're trying to address their issues right now so that we can get that for the window. The bigger that window is, the more opportunity to have any kind of intermittent service. One of the problems is though, I don't know if we'll be able to give you ahead of time, it's up here, 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 here. What we might be able to do is, it looks like in a couple of weeks, if things go well, we might have, this time available. So, but you're not gonna be able to put it on a calendar, 3 months ahead of time.
Yeah, no, Roland's correct, exactly correct.
Okay.
It all depends, well, first of all, on permits, what the permits will do. But those whalers we push on the dock, how long it takes them to pull those out, put those back together before we can even think about resuming some kind of service for the islanders. The gooseberry side, that should be no problem. That is easy squeezy. They push the piles in the sand, everything goes well. The island side is the hard side. There's a whole layer of rock there in front of that dock and around that area. I don't know if you guys remember when they built the breakwater on the side, you saw the drill sitting on the barge. So half of that breakwater had to be drilled into the rock. And that's what we're facing now. So they do what's called a rock socket. They drill into the rocks so far. They have a formula, and they go down so far, put a sleeve down, put the pile inside, start pouring their concrete and pulling the sleeve on the outside. So that all takes time. And depending on how much rock they find and how deep they have to go, that's really our deciding factor. So once they get that done, then at that point we can say, yeah, we can pull the barge out, or they can shut down for a couple of days, or whatever we come up with, so that we can get some resemblance of service back, so you guys get the essentials you want,
And we're still gonna be asking to put the barge over eelgrass. We can't spud it down at all, but we're still gonna be asking. And if they say it's mitigatable, then we'll find out what the cost of mitigation is. Right now, they're saying, no, it's not gonna happen. And we're saying, okay, are you ready to put that in writing? It's not gonna happen, or we still can talk about it? And so far, they're letting us continue to talk. I'm not sure they're listening, but we're still pushing on that. Plus, during the bid time, Gary has to work very closely with the design team and James during all the construction, because then, okay, get the wing walls in. So do you work on the outside, or do you work on the north side or the south side, or, setting that up when you start actually working on the dolphins at that point, need to figure out how the chief can safely operate, especially in winter months with dolphins moving around.
Yeah. I would agree, there's a lot of moving parts. What I would add to this question is, in the request for proposal to the company that will build the boat, can't you put this chunk of request in there to get an actual price on doing that? Because short of you asking them, if they start doing it, and then if you ask later, oh, by the way, we really needed this also.
So, so that being said, Tom, that's exactly what we're gonna do, but it all comes down to the permits. So first thing we gotta get the permits, like Roland said, they're still talking, see if they can put the barge over the eelgrasses or whatever. Once we get that figured out, then we can go ahead to the barge companies and say, hey, you guys can work here, is it possible for here, or this or that? So at this point, we cannot give you a definite answer of where we're at. We gotta wait until the permits come out, Roland.
Oh, we're not done.
I mean, we're not even.
Environmental is
Environmental, so.
a year off.
A year off. So that's kind of where we're at. We can give you generalities, but it could change 360 degrees by the time we get there. So.
What James told me is that he's looking at doing is figuring out with as great as the detail as an engineering estimate can do, and then putting requirements on each phase of construction. So you figure out how to get the wing walls done in 6 weeks or whatever it is. If we think it's gonna take 6 weeks, that's it. And then there'll be a intermittent period of time that the chief can operate. And you figure out how to do that. And then we're gonna do, let's say, the North Dolphins, and you have X number of weeks to get those done. And then the chief has to come in. And then, you know, setting it up to that way. The issue is, and the reason why I've been saying we need a plan for 6 months is because I've been doing this a little while. And even though the Corps of Engineers, for example, gave us the permit to do the Birch Bay berm, they took a week to issue the permit. We submitted it on a Monday, a little more than a week. The next Tuesday, we had a permit in hand from the Corps of Engineers. And we thought, this is great. The Office of Archaeology and Historic Preservation, which normally kind of stamps it and moves it in, 2.5 years later, we got our permit. None of us planned on that at all. I didn't have that anywhere in my timelines at all. Given that, and because that is, okay, you're gonna live with water crashing on the roadway. That's a little different than living without vehicle service and the significance of that issue, which is why I would like to plan for the full outage. But our goal is certainly to not have that.
Okay. I'll try to be brief. Oh, go ahead.
I had a follow-up kind of question related to that you were talking about. Is there a way to kind of kill two birds with one stone? Since we're gonna have to move the Gooseberry Point side anyways, to actually move it first so that we aren't building one on the Gooseberry side, we're pre-building it, you know, as part of this whole process, so that we're not putting in a ferry dock at Gooseberry and then 10, 15 years later moving it.
So when we started this process, to let you know, when we started this process, the concern was that by the time we got the new lease done, and it's signed by the Secretary of Interior, given what was going on in Washington DC at the time, and now, that as far as the time it takes to get all of that done, we may not have the chief running.
Gotcha.
So we looked at, I mean, it doesn't seem to make sense to put in new dolphins and new infrastructure, but all we're putting in is new dolphins. We're not rebuilding the whole terminal. We will be rebuilding the whole terminal. And there's a lot of things that need to be approved on that terminal, especially if you want to come 2 in and 2 off. But that's what happened. There was just the reality of that. There's also the reality of the cost. It's going to cost millions and millions and millions of dollars more than just putting in dolphins. So that's where we were. Also, our relationship with the Lummi Nation wasn't as strong as it is right now. 6, 7 years ago when we talked about doing that. The idea was at one time, I think before you were even on LifePack, we wanted to do that. That was the goal, is to have the new terminal constructed and then rebuild Lummi Island. Right now, the timing issue, the timing constraints, or not a problem, but the one we're dealing with is the Lummi Island side, just from what Gary was saying about having.
Thank you.
Thank you, that's good.
Got one last question. I won't read the whole thing, but to summarize, in the past, we had requested that the ad hoc committee be included by Zoom in the 2 previous propulsion meetings that you had. You and I talked about this. So any ongoing propulsion meetings between you and KPFF or Elliott Bay, we would like to be present on Zoom, not that we have any say on it, but just to listen in on the proceedings.
Absolutely, and we should talk afterwards and kind of work on some details. Part of the issue is I'm not involved with those meetings at all, because I'm not dealing with the vessel. I'm dealing with a lot of the environmental stuff and the Lummi Nation stuff. So I need to get you connected with the right folk. Even James is in on some of those conversations. So let's talk about that and making that happen.
Okay, thank you. Briefly, we talked a little bit in our group about communications, which isn't really anything necessarily tied in with the vessel and the terminal, but I'll read it. WCFAC needs to find a vehicle for dissemination of more information to the community. Many people don't read the minutes of our meetings, and then we are inundated with many questions, most of which we will be addressing as this new committee is in place tonight. We've received many letters on the 6th month of interaction especially, and we would like to work with Leica and their website to streamline the process of communication. So that's not so much for you, but that's just kind of how we think, I think we need to proceed in our committee. Lastly, 6 months of Ferry outage in July. I won't even read what I have there except to say again, the committee that's being formed tonight will be addressing all that. So that's not the purview of our vessel and terminal group. That's all I have.
Okay. So now we are going to move forward to developing a committee to look at the many issues that will come up during a potential 6-month outage. So committee, does anybody have suggestions on what we should call this committee?
Island access.
Diane?
Island access.
Island Access Committee. Any other suggestions? Okay. What about discussion about how this should move forward?
I have some questions.
Yeah.
Actually, questions for Roland, that will help me understand what we can do or how we should proceed. So when KPFF was here, and thank you for providing those slides, they asked how, they had several questions for the community, including how we can best, the best way to communicate with them. But I don't know, will this all be through, like, how will we communicate with KPFF in terms of, or somebody else, in terms of what the community is collecting and thinking and needing and finding?
Well, that we need to work out. So I'll be one of the people working that out with you, but I won't be maybe doing all of the collection. We may have a Dropbox where it goes, maybe it's a specific website that is set up, or not website, email address that is set up. We did that when we did the local service. I would like to use past successes. The surveys were very informative. Open houses were very informative. And then ongoing construction conversation at every meeting. You have open session, and I'll be taking notes. If people are talking about, well, what about this? What about that? Taking notes to make sure those things get addressed. That's the way that we did those in the local service, and we were able to accomplish that. One of the things that we have increased, we, Whatcom County Public Works, have increased our social media presence greatly. We are on X and Facebook. I think Mandy sends everything to the Tome. And we also even have a podcast, Public Works podcast. And we'll have one on the ferry construction podcast. We'll figure out who will be the guest for that. So if there's other things that come up and other ideas, if there's any way that we can make it happen, we're going to make it happen. So as we're going through this, we will be setting up an open house. And one of the things that I need from this committee or your ad hoc committee is the best ways to do that. Is that through just renting this place? Is that something that Leica would like to, I understand, maybe like to be involved with? What does that mean? I don't know what that means to me.
By open house, you mean town hall?
Yeah, so there are services that are needed but we don't know who those providers are. We don't have a list of every propane. So, so one of the things that we're setting up is a spreadsheet on the type of service, who the service provider is, their contact information, and that sort of thing. We need to gather all of that information up so that we can check with every propane provider that comes to the island and start talking about how, are we gonna have a tank up here? Are we gonna have a truck parked here? How can we do that?
So Roland, every time we've asked for something from the county like that, we've been told how few resources you have. What about a more collaborative approach? Where what I thought we were gonna do, and maybe what we'd end up doing, is having a pod working on propane, a pod working on garbage, a pod working on first aid and emergency. And instead of just sending ideas off to the county, empowering some of these people to fill in that spreadsheet. I don't know, I mean.
Well, that's exactly where we want to go with the town hall, the open house or the town hall, is that very thing. And look for volunteers who can help with that and understand the needs of the community.
We've heard from the community, from almost all of the community groups wanting to participate in this process, like the civic club, the fire department, the Grange. There's not a single island group that I know of that hasn't already reached out to see how they can help, how they can be part of this group. So I think I don't think we'll have any trouble identifying people to help, organizing them into groups, like Carol said, collecting the data that you need. Also, Leica has a booth at the Saturday market. They said they're willing to collect data every Saturday market, June, July, and August.
Wonderful.
So we'll have a lot of good opportunities.
So kind of getting back to what your question was, we have not set up the plan on gathering information.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that we need help with. So is to establish, because we've already started. Well, if you said, well, you know what? How about we have different groups, and what if each one takes a type of service? Sounds great. Let's work on that. And then figuring out, okay, when's the best time to have this open house? Or do we have 3 or what have you?
Right, so thank you for that, Roland. I have 2 other questions, and I'll ask them together. When will it be communicated? So it sounds like the time period for the construction of the terminals could be squishy. It could be 3 years out. It might, Liz said the other day at the council meeting, it might be 4 or 5, in 4 years, or
No.
2026, she even mentioned. So I mean, when will we know?
2027, they have to be under construction. So it's either gonna be August, unless we can get an extension into July. We're asking for July 1st to start.
In 2027.
2027,
So 3 years and a month or 2 from now,
right.
we will start.
Okay.
We're getting some pushback, and it may end up being July 15th, but we're asking for, the fish window is from August 1st to February 1st. And we're asking for July 1st, February 15th, I think.
Okay, so that sounds pretty solid then. And then if you could just very briefly address, or maybe come back to us with, as you know, the island has, lots of people that are ready to roll up their sleeves and jump in. So what I'm curious is what is in the purview of Public Works to arrange or provide. So in other words, arranging for fuel trucks to come over, for instance, as an example, or trash, or, trash pickup. I mean, at some point, I don't think we need it right now, but I think at some point, we're gonna need to know, like, we don't want to be wasting your time or our time in terms of, well, we need this, but it turns out that's not something that Public Works could touch.
So I'll tell you what we're working on. Right now, we're identifying all of the public properties on Lummi Island and the viability of them to be used for parking for, vehicles or stockpile. And then we'll be evaluating each one. And if it's a wet field, we may have to bring in some pit run to make it solid enough to park a propane truck on, for example. We will do what we can on getting some specific runs for the chief to bring those vehicles over. We are still looking at a landing craft that we can load in the Port of Bellingham. That's the closest place that we can get permission to land. We're no longer allowed to go on Gulf Road, and we're no longer allowed to dump at the Stomish grounds. Those are no. So I have talked to the Port of Bellingham. They have an area that the landing craft can be loaded straight in or actually from the side, like a cargo ship kind of thing.
Roland,
So-
I think that,
But getting us where to land over here has been a little more challenging.
I think from my point of view, the sharp point of the question is, how much money does the county have in the budget to cover the extraordinary costs of, say, hiring the propane company to park a truck over here? In other words, or the garbage providers or whatever, so there is going to be costs involved in all of this, and they are not costs that an ordinary individual unincorporated area property owner would ordinarily have to pay. So the county is closing the road. Hopefully the county has in their budget how they are going to provide these services.
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, so right now, you may be able to provide a mechanism, but you won't actually be able to provide the money to pay for it.
That's my current understanding, but that's not my call, but that's my understanding.
Thank you.
Okay. So let's hear from the committee. Do we have anyone that would like to volunteer to be on the Island Access Committee?
So are we talking about an ad hoc
This
committee?
is the ad hoc committee, like we have two other ad hoc committees, the codes ad hoc committee, the electric ferry and docks ad hoc committee. This would now be the third ad hoc committee that we're using, the Island Access ad hoc committee.
Or give it a different name. Sure.
You can always change your name once you.
Change my name,
Do we have any volunteers?
Sure, I do it.
Carol would like to volunteer to be on that committee. Thank you.
I don't have time.
You're very,
In
yeah.
the past, I think we thought we need two
We have to have
members.
two.
We have to have.
It's in the code.
Okay.
Yeah, it's in the code. Two members.
That would be two members.
I would volunteer for the time being, but I would reserve the right to. Somebody else has to step up.
Now, that was a wishy-washy volunteer if ever I heard one. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. And then, so the only caveat would be, if you would like to remove yourself from the committee, you have to find a replacement. Because we have to have two members.
No, I understand that, but I would bring it to the committee.
Oh, right,
Okay.
are you planning on?
No, I'm just saying, I don't want to volunteer for something for the next 3 years or, however long. The caveat that we might need to find somebody else to step in at some point. Share the joy.
Yeah, and share the joy of it.
Pam, I have permission to be on that ad hoc committee if you're interested.
Oh, you do have permission to be, that'd be great, Kim, actually. I think that'd be super helpful.
I believe there have been members of the community that have already indicated.
Yeah.
For instance, a former Life Act member, Judy Olson, told me that she would be willing.
We have had many members of the community that have reached out to say that they would like to be part of this group. So I think we are gonna leave that to the ad hoc committee group to kind of figure out how they wanna do that. Personally, I believe that it would be smart to try to get, community leaders from the various community organizations, to be the nexus of the group. And then there will probably be subcommittees under this group that will go out, doing various things as well.
So I think you actually have to appoint the members of an ad hoc fair committee. But I think this, issue is of such importance to the island that it would make sense for LICA, to form, a committee, and I don't quite know how to blend those two things.
LICA has reached out and said that they would like to partner with us for sure in this process. And partnership is the way that I would envision it, just so that we don't have independent groups going off and duplicating work that we, don't need to be duplicated.
And about the time the 10th person calls the same propane company,
Yeah,
the same information, we're gonna piss off. the
yeah, and
community.
that's what we would like to try to avoid
So,
for sure.
yeah, I see putting out a big umbrella, having buckets, and then having people come in and grab the bucket and
And
take
like
them
it is, exactly, like it's having a board meeting on the 9th of May, and Bill Sadler, the president, is going to bring it forward to them to see how they would like to participate with us. But,
Could we do this as, we did, before, and say that Carol and Catherine and Pam as president will coordinate with LICA, and we'll form this group and come up with a potential roster and a potential plan, and then bring that to us instead of us trying to develop it at the meeting.
absolutely, and that they can reach out to community members to put together the group.
Right. And so then at our June meeting, we would have a fully named, or a roster, and you could, formally name all of the members of the committee.
But all of the main members of the committee, and then there still may be subcommittees, each of them can have their own subcommittee.
I would like input from the committee, all of us sitting here. If you have a group that's working on propane, how many people can be on? I mean, what do you guys think is reasonable for, I think we have more people who want to do stuff than might be workable. I mean, if I can get 5 girlfriends together to go out to coffee, but if it goes to 7 or 8 or 9, it becomes a nightmare. So I don't know. Yes, Todd?
Yeah, I think the best thing you could do would be to partner with the fire department leadership here, because they have incident command structure training. And so allowing them to take the lead on designing the way that the committee is going to be structured and communicate, and they can provide that, and they've already got a template for that. The incident command system is already set up to really address a lot of the issues that you all are going to be facing. Most of the time, incident command is in an emergency setting, but with this long-term idea of dealing with the problem, it's almost geared for it perfectly as well, even though it's a longer time training. And Public Works probably has some helpfulness there too.
Yeah, we run incident command as well. And so if this doesn't define emergency, I'm not sure really what does, so.
And then the other, I guess, thing I was going to add would be that, the great thing is you're on an island. And so you have access to voter registration records, you have access to the property records through the county, and those are all public. And so actually you can find out how many people you actually have to contact, how many people actually live here. It's not as big a problem, and you also have access to the one way in and one way off right now. And so by even just starting out and working with Public Works to maybe pass out a handout with a QR code and a website that they can, when they take a fare from somebody, they can have them hand that. I don't know if that's something that they are allowed to do, but I bet the county could authorize that, especially with a specific communication saying, hey, in 2027, we're not gonna have ferry service for 6 months. We need your input and getting people, and you can reach everybody through there. And, you know, as soon as, you know, somebody has had it once or twice, they're gonna want it again. So it's not like it's an unending stream. So anyhow, those are the 2 points that I might consider making.
And I agree definitely about the incident command system, because right now we're planning for a 3-month, a 6-month period in 3 years. But we know if the chief breaks down with the way that the dry docks are plugged up, we could have an unanticipated extended outage like that. And there's a local, of the Whatcom Ferry has been out for a month, and there's no, plan when it's coming back into service because of a mechanical outage. So we know that can happen to us, so having something like incident command in place already, you have a system to go to and a way to begin, focusing on what's needed.
Judy Olson has a question, would like to ask a question. So I can ask her to unmute.
Sure, yeah.
Judy, can you unmute and ask your question?
Hear me?
Yes.
Hi, everybody. I think this is mostly a question for Roland, and my question is, I know that you hold a position within Public Works called Special Projects Manager or whatever, I don't know, but my thought is that wondering if Public Works has any funds available to potentially hire a highly qualified project manager for this island access situation, someone with lots and lots of initials behind their name and lots of experience to run this very special and very important project.
No. I don't know if Judy, if you can hear me.
Yes, I can.
Yeah, no, this one is going to be me and some of the people at KPFF working with the committee to pull this together. So that's one of the reasons why we're trying to get several other projects done, because in about 3 months, I anticipate we're going to be knee deep in this, and I'll be spending a lot of time working on this one.
Okay, well, so I believe that I have to make a recommendation that Carol Lamb and Catherine Shornick will be the 2 ad hoc, you just get to do it, Island Access Committee members. I will sit in as an ad hoc member as well. And we will meet in the meantime and be ready to bring forward a full roster for a meeting in June.
Whoa, excuse me,
Yes.
I'm not promising a full roster in June, but perhaps I think that's a little overly ambitious. So I think that we can promise to start, or maybe start a structure of what we need.
By full roster, I meant members, not a plan for like all the stuff we need.
Well, are you talking about
Flesh out the
community members
committees.
or just the?
I'm talking about the rest of the community members to fill out the structure of the committee. That we should be able to complete that by our June meeting.
We can hope to.
Yeah, we'll hope to.
There you go.
Okay, I would like to take a minute here to do some open session comments, because you guys have been amazingly patient and quiet during all this work and
Do you want to talk
discussion.
about the date of our meetings before we commence?
Yep, we're not gonna have too much time for it, so there's one, we have changed our meeting twice. Currently, we're meeting on the first Wednesday of the month, and that is the same day as the Grange meeting. So the Grange members are important parts of our community, and they will never be here when we're meeting on their Grange night. So how do people feel about changing to the second Wednesday or the third Wednesday of the month to avoid the Grange?
Yeah, I can't do second
You
Wednesday,
can't do second,
but
I can't do third.
and you can't do third.
What about fourth?
Leica meets on the third, isn't that Leica? Is it the third or fourth
Wednesday?
Wednesday? Do we
Were
know
you-
if it's
were
the
you
third
asking?
or fourth Wednesday?
What, is it the third or fourth Wednesday when Leica meets? Fourth Wednesday, Leica. If they're meeting May 9th, then it must be the second. Oh, that's the board meeting. Usually the board meets the week before.
I think they meet on the third.
I'm sorry that I can't,
I'll check with them.
So Pam, I believe when we met in the garden room with the county, we had the same discussion and nothing worked except the first Wednesday. That's my recollection. Right, Todd?
I
That's
think
pretty much
the
where
fourth.
we ended up, I think, on
with
the
the
first
first
Wednesday.
Monday.
Yeah.
So we may just have to stick with the first Monday.
The Grange
What-
may have to change.
What about the
Excuse me,
fourth?
first Wednesday, yeah.
First Wednesday.
What about the fourth Wednesday?
Yeah. We have someone who can't do it on the third, someone who can't do it on the second, and the first is the Grange. What about the fourth?
I'm checking to see when.
Well, Leica has set up a structure now where they're only meeting every quarter. And so it's not monthly anymore, so it wouldn't interfere with them even that much, even if it was the fourth.
Like it does meet on the fourth?
No, I think they meet on the third, but, I said even if they met on the fourth, they're only doing it quarterly now.
Well, let's ask the question for our group. Anybody in our group can't meet on the fourth?
The fourth Wednesday?
Yeah.
No.
One thing you might want to consider is if you're gonna move it to the fourth, you better have another one in May, otherwise you're gonna go almost 2 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would not be able to make the fourth Wednesday in May, but otherwise, I'm not sure. Sorry.
Well, maybe what we do is we meet the first, we keep it on the first like we did before, we change it for June. So for our next meeting, it's the first Wednesday in June, and then beginning in July, because the first week of July is a bad time to meet
Yeah,
anyway.
right.
And at the first meeting, at the first Wednesday in June, when we meet, by then, we may have some ideas about some intermediate open houses or town halls or something before the fourth Wednesday in July. And so that might work out.
Any problem with that? We'll continue with the first Wednesday for June, and we'll consider the fourth Wednesday in July, but there may be a town hall before that in June, in July.
Yeah,
Okay,
Mary Ross would like to ask a question.
pardon me?
Mary Ross would like to ask a question.
Okay, but then we have two people set up here to,
She's involved with Leica, so she probably knows.
Like,
yeah.
Mary, can you unmute yourself and ask your question? Mary, can you hear me? If you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question, that would be great.
Okay, Leica has gone to meeting quarterly. I'm no longer involved with Leica, but they are meeting quarterly now, so, and they, so I think that probably wouldn't have a problem on the fourth Wednesdays.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you, Mary. Okay, there's two people signed up to speak for open session. The first person that would like to speak is Ralph Steele. Ralph, you have the floor.
There's some very quick comments about the new code. I invite Diane to jump in with some quick comments and correct me or whatever. The first one is the item C in the fair considered revenue. 2 months ago, the legal department of Whatcom County said that they didn't need to change the code to accept ARPA funds. So for Director Koza to look up at council and say, this is a gift, this is an advantage, and I don't buy that. We've been asking for 10 months to have the dolphins funded. The county said we were eligible in March of 2023 for ARPA funds for the dolphins. They repeated in February 2024 to saying the county executive asked me 2 things to pass on to the committee. County blah, 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 would like to use ARPA funds for the revenue shortfall and past extraordinary expenses, dolphin repairs, signed, Ms. Koza. 2 months ago, and then a week later that evaporated.
I believe her plan is to ask for ARPA funds at the first county council meeting in May.
For dolphins.
For ARPA funds for the ferry system.
For, it would go into fair revenue, and my assumption is that it will go to cover the current shortfall, and if any was left over, it would go to start pre-funding this new ferry fund reserve target. I doubt seriously there will be any money left from 458,000 ARPA funds for anything other than those 2 items.
Right. Okay. Just with regard to the fare box considered
Revenue?
Reserve, new term. There's 3 different definitions in this code. One is in K, which just says it's an accumulation of surpluses and deficits from prior years, period. The second one says you take that amount of the projected, which could be 800,000, or it could be 1.5 million, and it says you decrease it by 1.5 million. We currently have a surplus of about 300,000. They're going to immediately, effective 4 months ago, decrease it by 800,000, say a deficit of 500,000. That's going to grow by 350,000. And that will come back. We have 2 ferry increases each year. We have one discussed the second quarter of each year. There's have to be a ferry increase if we're losing $700,000 a year and have to build up $1 million after the county secured $2.5 million. That's why I'm saying twice a year. I currently have in my family 14 cards, 5 different people buying cards. If I'm going to stand in line for half an hour, they're not going to get punch cards. They're going to pay the full fare.
And I think the county hopes that you will, because they
Yes.
get more fair revenue that way.
Ferry fund reserve target, I mentioned that. That's,
10 years.
I'm not sure whether Diane wants to comment on an annual ferry fund reserve target will be subtracted. It doesn't say 55%. It says the whole thing will be subtracted, and that could last for 5 years, it could last for 10 years.
There are
Break even.
There are drafting errors in this ordinance that are really confusing, and that's what I said, that whoever was helping draft this did a very poor job.
A CPI increase in that. So then with the annual increase. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Bob Anderson.
Yeah, I feel like I have to take a deep breath before I make my comments, because I can't believe how reasonable, how measured and professional you as a committee are. 3 weeks ago, less than 3 weeks ago today, Ralph and I sat here, you as a committee were very concerned about where the public works proposals for the code revisions were, including 2 that surprised you. You hadn't seen yet, and you got a special meeting of the Public Works and Health Committee so that you could raise your concerns. I want to say it again, not one, except getting more money quickly to the county was approved by the county council. That is not collaboration. I don't care how you look at it. That is not collaboration. And you folks, you know, I admire your professionalism, but frankly, I'm speaking for you, I believe. And and the level of frustration and lack of collaboration and trust that is coming from our Public Works Department. Now, this business about Section C in the code, that Section C provides for the WCFAC to make a request for additional funds if there are extraordinary expenses in the future. That was never discussed with you.
No.
That was a surprise to you, Pam, when you sat in that meeting room. That was never discussed in this forum or in this environment so that we could have that understanding. But frankly, it doesn't say anything. There's no commitment, there's no guarantee, there's no anything. There's not even a mention of WCFAC in here. So to me, that's smoke and mirrors. That's blowing smoke. That is not answering the question, which Todd Donovan and others had. John Scannell, if you're still listening here, you were there. There was a lot of concern that there would be other dolphin kinds of issues. And the Director of Public Works said, well, there's this provision, Section C, and everybody nodded and said, well, that'll be just fine. Well, baloney. How do you know you get that money? How do you know the fare box wouldn't be loaded up again? I frankly am very discouraged. I'm sorry to say that. You as a committee deserve better.